Chapter 22, Rose. Grace undid the 2 latches on the old trunk, then paused. "You're being ridiculous," she whispered. "Do you expect a skeleton to jump out? Open the trunk." She lifted the lid. Inside was a jumble of manila envelopes, file folders, and dozens of moleskin journals, just like the ones Grace used. Buried beneath the mess was the Frankenstein monkey. She remembered what Marty had said. "It's probably packed away somewhere you haven't looked." She untangled Monkey and pulled him out, happy to have him aboard, but mad at Marty for hiding him in a place she would least likely to look. With Monkey in her lap, she picked up the top envelope and carefully undid the clasp. Inside were photographs of her mother when she was young. Marty had told her about the photos, but she hadn't really believed him until now. Her mother, Rose Blackwood, looked exactly like Grace had when she was that age. The same robin's egg blue eyes, the same curly black hair. It was true. She and her mother could have been twins. There were photos of her mother holding tiger cubs, riding a zebra, feeding an ostrich. And in every photo was a beaming younger Noah Blackwood. He didn't look at all like the evil person she knew him to be. He looked like a happy, doting father. But there was something very important missing from every photo. A wife. Rose's mother, Grace's grandmother. Where was she? Who was she? What happened to her? There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Grace said, trying to get the photos back into the envelope, but not before Wolf walked in with a worried look. "Thank God you're all right," he said. "I was just down at the lab, and Laurel and Luther said you were in here alone." "I spend a lot of time in here alone," Grace said. "Not anymore. I'm having Laura move in with you." "Why?" Wolf filled her in on his conversation with Marty. "Is Marty okay?" "He's fine. Do you have any idea who the stowaway is?" "No, but it's certainly one of Blackwood's men, and whoever he is, he had help getting onto the Kolenkov. So you're dealing with more than one person. I think the stowaway is operating in the open, posing as someone he isn't. Hopefully I will be able to figure out who he is and who's helping him. Until he does, you, Marty, and Luther aren't to go anywhere alone. The only people you can trust are me, Bertha, Phil, Al and his men, Laurel, and Annamika, whom I don't think you've met yet, but you will. As soon as she's feeling better, she's going to help with the hatchlings. Everyone else aboard, I suspect. I thought our quick departure would keep us a step ahead of Blackwood, but it looks like he's caught up with us. After what happened to Marty tonight, we know he's coming at us hard." Wolf paused. "Ted and I knew it would come down to this one day." What really went on between you and my grandfather?" Grace asked. "It's been going on for so many years," Wolf said. "It's hard to know where to start. Your grandfather was a friend of my father's. I've known him since I was a kid. My father and Noah had a falling out, but not before I learned more about him than I ever wanted to." "Then why did you catch the great white shark for him?" "You've heard the saying, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer." Grace nodded. "It works both ways. Ted and I needed money to fund his inventions. I needed money to start E-Wolf and to get Rose away from Blackwood. Noah hired us because we were the only people with the technology to get the job done. But that wasn't the only reason. He wanted to keep me close so he could keep an eye on me. I knew a lot more about him than he wanted to know, and he recognized Ted's genius. And he wanted that, too. Ted and I knew this going in, so we took precautions. Noah has met Ted, but he really doesn't even know what Ted looks like. When we caught the Great White, Ted disguised himself as an absent-minded geek." Wolf smiled. "Believe me, Ted is anything but a geek. He did it because we knew from the very beginning that Noah Blackwood was going to come after us eventually. When you don't trust someone and consider them a future adversary, it's best to have them underestimate your capabilities. This way, they'll base their decision to hurt you on who they think you are. In other words, underestimating you weakens their attack." Grace was confused. This was a side of Wolf she's never seen. He didn't sound like a biologist. He sounded like a general waging a war or a spy. "How do you know all this?" "That's a long and very complicated story, which I prefer to save for another time. For now, let me tell you about the great white shark." "All right," Grace said, "but only if you promise to tell me the long, complicated story soon." "Cross my heart," Wolf said, sounding more like a father she knew. "I've told you what Ted and I knew before we caught the great white. After we caught it, we knew we weren't going to give Noah the shark box we'd built, no matter how much money he offered to pay us for it. We also knew that we weren't going to catch a second great white for him after it died, which of course it eventually did. We knew that as soon as we had the money in hand for catching the shark. I was going to marry Rose and take her away from Noah. Rose and I knew that we were going to find every cryptid we could and protect them from her father and stop him from adding them to his ghoulish collection. Wolf paused and tears came to his eyes. Then I got Rose killed. That wasn't your fault, Grace said. In Noah Blackwood's eyes, it was totally my fault, and there's something else. What? Grace asked quietly. After my father died, Noah took me under his wing, and he didn't do it out of affection. He did it because I was very good at finding things that were supposed to be impossible to find. But that doesn't matter. In his eyes, I betrayed his trust. Ted and I are the only two people on earth who had survived that sin. The time has come to pay the devil his due. Wolf looked at the manila envelope in Grace's hands. You've opened the trunk. Just before you came in, Grace said, there are old photographs. Mom and I look just like each other. You certainly do. There don't seem to be any photos of my grandmother, at least that I've seen yet. I don't think you'll find any. Why? That's another question Rose was trying to find an answer to. Blackwood told her that her mother had died when she was a year old, but Rose didn't believe him. There are photos of her when she was just hours old. Her mother isn't in them. Rose didn't even know her mother's name. Blackwood refused to tell her. She told her that her mother's loss was too painful for him and that she was never to bring it up. She didn't even know her mother's first name, Grace asked. Wolf shook his head. The only person who knows your grandmother is Noah Blackwood. Rose was convinced that Noah kept it a secret because her mother was still alive. With a name, even just a first name, Rose might be able to track her down. Have you ever looked through the trunk? Rose showed me some of the photos, but I never went through it on my own. She never said that I couldn't, but I consider the trunk her private domain. There was an unspoken agreement that I shouldn't. After she was killed and I lost my leg, the trunk was the least of my concerns. I needed to get you back to the States and situated with my sister so Blackwood couldn't get his hands on you. I thought about the trunk from time to time. I could have gone back for it or had Monsalto ship it to me. Why didn't you? I didn't want to dredge up old memories. I was afraid.